Well, first off, thank you all for joining us for this very important conversation. We're at the National Civil Rights Museum, obviously in the Jim Crow exhibit. Let's first, just for those who don't know, go ahead and spell your name and your title, please, and who you're with.
I'm Keith Norman, Keithnorman. I'm the senior pastor, servant leader of First Baptist Church, Broad Avenue.
Kenneth T. Whalum Jr., WHALUM, pastor, New Olivet Worship Center in Cordova. Been here for Memphis born, Memphis bred. When I die, I'll be Memphis dead.
Okay.
I'm Dr. Pete Gatke, professor of religion at Lemoyne-Owen College. Gatke spelled Gathje.
Okay, pronounced Gatke.
Gatke.
Dr.
Yes,
Gatke.
sir.
Okay,
Yeah.
So one thing is clear, you all obviously love the city of Memphis and you all want to be here, and it's important that you all discuss the importance of bringing about positive change in our city. So I wanted to have a conversation with you all. We're going to record this as live, but it's not live right now. So we'll have a conversation. Feel free to, at any point, I'll ask questions, but jump in and feel free at any point to, give your thoughts on the situation. So as faith leaders, I think it's very important for us to discuss the topic of the National Guard here in Memphis, or coming to Memphis soon, and the role of faith leaders in the civil rights movement. So let's first go ahead and talk about what was the role of the church or faith leaders during the civil rights movement?
Well, without the church, there would have been no civil rights movement. The moral ethos of the demonstrators and protesters was birthed literally in the church. Were it not for black and white pastors and other denominational leaders, there would have been no moral center for the movement. And it's moving to know that still exists.
Gotcha. Dr. Norman?
I would agree. Not just the conscious, but also the funding source, the private meetings and the public gatherings, the information system before there was a technology system to communicate by text messages. We could get the word out over the pulpit, and we could really move people in spaces and places to take action. Montgomery bus boycott and many other things were word of mouth. They were not things that you could say, put it on television, because nobody would air it. So it was the heart of the movement.
Not to mention the locus, the place where the people met.
Yeah.
They wouldn't have been able to meet anywhere were it not for church
The church,
sanctuaries
right.
and fellowship halls.
Yeah.
Right.
That was exactly what I was going to point to, is that these were places that African Americans could be safe, places of inspiration, places of theological visioning, so that the movement was certainly a political and social and economic movement, but it was a faith movement. And so the vision, the language, the songs, all of that was emerging out of the African American churches of the time.
Yeah.
And you all are all very respected leaders here in the city of Memphis and across the Mid-South. I want to talk more about the current role the church plays in fighting crime here in the city of Memphis. There is no secret that the city of Memphis, we have a crime issue, like many cities. But what current role does your churches or faith leaders play in currently fighting crime across the city of Memphis? Dr. Norman?
Well, it varies. And you said our churches, so I'm going to speak specifically about ours, but unfortunately it varies from some to none. Some churches play a great role, some churches play no role at all. And so it is important for us to talk about the things I think that we are doing, or we can suggest that we empower people to do. And when we talk about crime, I think it's important to talk about the systemic things that surround it. You're not talking about crime as an issue of violence alone. You're talking about education. You're talking about clean communities. You're talking about poverty. And you're talking about giving people the skills to mediate problems. And so we work in all of those spaces, and we also speak directly to the issue of supporting law enforcement, partnership with police and clergy across the community and law enforcement agencies, attending meetings, whatever it may be, to support our local government and law enforcement branches.
Gotcha.
I like to frame it, yes and amen. And I like to frame it like this with regard to crime specifically. Were it not for the churches, we'd be overrun.
Yeah.
Were it not for the black church especially, we'd be overrun. And so although the black church especially gets a lot of negative press, we get a bad rep, people who don't go to church talk like they know what goes on in the church. And that can be difficult to sort of deal with in real time. But to Pastor Norman's point, individually is where I think we have our greatest impact. And really that makes sense. If you come in from a macro view and focus in on a micro view to each congregation, if you've got a lot of kids in your church like we do, if you can direct them and help them individually to make good decisions, then they won't be a part of the crime problem.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that it's important to think of churches as institutions, but churches as communities of people of faith. And so people of faith are spread out all over the city in nonprofits and businesses, doing all sorts of work that's about building up the community and the sense of belonging in this space. And I think that's, if we're really serious about reducing crime, we have to talk about the quality of life in the community as a whole. And that's where people of faith who are inspired, formed by churches, are out in the community doing all sorts of things. I think of just one example of Knowledge Quest with Reverend Marlon Foster in South Memphis, who is doing education, after-school programs, agriculture. So people are learning, a recording studio. I mean, people are learning knowledge and skills that are going to be helpful for them to sustain them in their lives, and providing an alternative to the kind of community that can be offered sometimes in folks that are doing the wrong thing. So to think of the churches as people of faith rather than simply as buildings or places, I think it's important to see how that spreads throughout the entire community to build up the community in a variety of ways.
So right now there are a lot of questions about the federal occupation currently underway in Memphis. We're all trying to understand it, put these numbers that we're being given into context, and just simply figure out what's really happening, is it effective, and what's going on. The Memphis Safe Task Force, in its second week of operations, targeted violent crime across Memphis and Shelby County, according to the task force. The Department of Justice reports 321 arrests in week one, including warrants, gun charges, and even a homicide. We're trying to break this all down as far as putting it in perspective, but what conversations have you all had with city, county, state, or even federal leaders about the National Guard or federal occupation coming here to Memphis? You want to start first, Doctor?
Well, I'll just say I haven't been consulted, which is, I think, true for most people in the city, right? It's sort of average citizens. We were not consulted about this surge or whatever it's being called. And so we're left with a lot of questions on the part of, like, how is this being organized? Who's really in charge? And what is the focus? Is the focus on violent crime, or as we're seeing in most recent report, it's a lot of traffic stops. Well, traffic stops are not going to really affect much in terms of violent crime, but they are going to target people who might have an expired tag, or a headlight out, or a rear light out. And who are those people? They're not the upper middle class. Who's really being targeted in terms of this occupation, or whatever you want to call it, I think is a question we have to keep asking. And also is, what's the sustainability of this? So we have this big to-do right now, but what happens when these folks leave? Then who's left to pick up the pieces? And have we really done something for the long-term reduction of crime, or have we just done something that sort of has a lot of publicity at this point? And sure, there's a lot of arrests, okay, fine, but what about after they leave? Have we built an infrastructure to continue the work of building community in the city of Memphis, or is this sort of just a one and done?
Valid points all. To directly answer your question about what conversations, what discussions we've had, with government officials. When word first came down that President Trump was thinking about sending in federal resources, Mayor Young convened a group of pastors and other faith leaders and other individuals to sort of let us know what he had heard was coming down the pike. And we discussed some things which I think address Peter's point, Professor Gatke's point, in that we talked about building a foundation to move forward from here. A couple of things we talked about in that meeting with Mayor Young was pastors, particularly black pastors, supporting black-owned businesses, very small scale across the city in a persistent and consistent way to try to strengthen the economy locally. That was one thing we talked about, because there are things that we can do and things that we can't do. One of the things we can't do is apparently force the president to change his mind about sending the forces, and apparently that's something we can't do. What we can do is let Memphians know, and particularly young people know, that we are with them and we're going to do whatever it takes, short-term and long-term, to build them up so that we can have at least a floor where when the federal forces leave, which who knows when that'll be, we won't devolve into a worse situation. The other thing we talked about in that meeting was trying to improve the educational outcomes of Memphis. And those are things that we as pastors can do. We can impact the educational outcomes. So a short answer to your question, yes, I've had those discussions.
And real quick before you answer, Dr. Norman,
Sure.
When was that meeting, and was it a closed-door meeting?
It was not a closed-door meeting,
Okay.
as I understand it. It was open and by invitation, but it was at Mississippi Boulevard.
Gotcha.
Pastor Turner.
Okay.
It was a very productive meeting. I think Pastor Norman was out of town that day, sent a representative. But the point is, it was an opportunity for us to at least know that the mayor did not want the federal involvement,
Right.
but that he was determined to work with whoever it was that was coming in.
So the public wasn't invited?
Was not invited, as far as I know.
Okay.
But that's a civil rights model. Call the pastors together and let them communicate to their congregations and to the community and other stakeholders.
Okay.
So that was not a lack of consideration for the public, but it was to corral a group that could come. And I was indeed out of town on that day and sent representation. However, I would say that what was really discussed was things we were already doing, continue to do them and do more of them. The idea of supporting the African American businesses, Dr. Whalum had brought that forward a month or two prior, I believe, for that meeting. And we just decided to double down on the things that we could do, because the federal government did not communicate and still has not communicated effectively to our local leaders, as they should, in disseminating information as to how this playbook should unfold. And so therefore, we could not have that information because they did not have that information. I believe that they're on record as saying that the communication has not been very effective from the federal government to the state and to the local government.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, if we recall, there has been even some disagreement from time to time from the governor and the federal government, the state and the federal government, because at one point the governor said this was not necessary. And then he came back and changed the playbook later, but I'm sure that's on another question further down the road.
So I do want to get more into your views on the National Guard, your personal views of where you all stand with this. Pastor Whalum, I know you mentioned in a prior interview with Channel 5 to Imani Williams, one of our reporters, that you mentioned bringing the National Guard 2 years ago because you believe it was needed then and still believe it's needed now. Why is that?
2023, everybody will recall there was a mass shooting on Beale Street. Hundreds of mostly black kids were gathered on the street. 8 of them were shot.
Yes.
And I, at that moment, called for the National Guard because, not because of any law enforcement kind of perspective, but because the National Guard is tasked to protect life and property. And that is what was in my spirit at the time. I went to both mayors at the time. Strickland was sitting mayor, Lee Harris was county mayor, spoke to them individually, told them what I thought, and they both said, no, it's not time yet, which is their right to do. And I was a lone wolf at the time and have been a lone wolf up to this time. But that's where I am personally.
Gotcha. And Pastor Norman, what have you shared with your congregation about the National Guard coming here? And what are your personal views about them being here?
First, to the point of Dr. Whalum, I could agree at the time of his calling for them at that moment more succinctly than I would at this moment, because the reasons are distinctly different. There was an issue of life, things being completely out of control in that incident, and that was a moment, a sentinel moment, that we needed a response. I think if we are talking about what we're seeing from the federal emphasis, the motivation is completely different, and that is what's concerning me. What I've shared with my congregation, however, is that this moment is upon us. And as we've said earlier, we can't change the president's mind on this. So what must we do in order to effectively navigate this and come out better than we went in? And then what are the sustainable things that we can create? Because you're right, we're going to have something to deal with when this is over. They can't be here forever, and we can't be in this situation forever. But if we don't learn, and if we don't do the things that are necessary to deconstruct some of the crime that has set up itself as strongholds in our city, we could be right back into this, because in the scriptural context, when a demon is swept clean, if you don't do something better to build something better in that space, it's coming back a little stronger than it was last time. So we need to fix that while we have a chance.
I'd like to respond, Dr. Gacke?
So we're sitting in this space, and I'm looking off to the right, and there's this question in red: how does it feel to be a problem? And I think that's a key question for Memphis as a community to ask. How does it feel for us to be defined by a problem, which is crime, or to be defined by a much larger story and reality of what this community truly is? How do we want to be defined, and who does the defining? The defining right now is being done by a national narrative going up to the White House with President Trump, that somehow African American majority cities are a problem, especially if they're run by Democrat mayors. And so how do we address that problem as a nation? Rather than offering the mayor and offering a city the kind of federal resources that would really address the problem, we offer the old narrative, which is the narrative of repression through things like the National Guard. So I think this is a time to ask questions about who are we as a community. Are we being defined as a problem? If so, who's defining us that way? And how do we challenge that definition in a way that leads the community into a better future?
And I think that is a perfect way to couch it, because we can't deny the truth of what he just said in terms of what Pastor Norman said about the motivation of the involvement of federal forces, in terms of the definition, but we also cannot and should not ignore the truth of why they are here in the first place. Why they are here, according to the memorandum that the president issued, is crime. That's why. Now, we don't know what his true motivations are. Nobody knows what our motivations are.
Correct.
But I think it would be unwise for us as a community to ignore that piece. Man, ask the grandparents or the parents of those 4 children who were shot inside their home on a Sunday night, 3-year-old, 6-year-old, and 2 15-year-olds, ask their parents if they would like for crime to stop. Well, everybody has to acknowledge it, and we can't get into a posture of politically opposing something and then ignore what's really going on in our community if we don't do something now. I think we've got, and I know we have, an unprecedented opportunity to do something about it.
And while we have that unprecedented opportunity, none of us disagree with the fact that there is a crime matter or issue in this city. It's the approach, it is the manner by which we are going about to try and solve it, whether we're doing it with a sledgehammer or a fly swatter in this case, and whether or not there are other things that should have been done prior to and that could be done in order to get there. The manner in which it's happening and the rhetoric by which it is unfolding, the terminology, and the very use of a system that seems to be oppressive and regressive to African American people. Let's face it, when we talk about unleashing the guard and when we talk about unleashing forces in a community, that's almost like sending a signal of old to control and repression, and whatever it takes, we're going to let people do their jobs. And that just really sounds very negative to me. I think even if we're going to go about accepting this, we can still talk about it in a civil tone, and we can give details to talk about here's what the plan looks like, and here's what people must do to comply, so that we don't have unnecessary confrontation. Because just like we see the parents who are losing children, which our heart goes out to, we eulogize these children sometimes and sit with these families. But I also sit with the families that have unfortunate encounters with law enforcement unnecessarily and heavy-handedly.
So this is a two-pronged question. And it boils down to trust in local officials. City data shows that violent crime is down 45% from last year, with 67 incidents and 1 murder so far this month. So with the National Guard or federal occupation coming into the city, does that mean that there's no trust in our local officials? Do you all trust our local officials to solve the issue? As you mentioned, there is a crime issue in Memphis. Do you all have trust in our local officials to solve the issue of crime in the city of Memphis?
I don't have trust in the local officials to solve the crime issue. I do have trust in the people who live in the communities to solve the crime issue. But that's impossible without the involvement of the local officials.
Yeah.
You see, this is why I say it's an unprecedented for us to do something for Memphis and by Memphis that had never been done before. We have, let me just put it like this.
Please.
It's inarguable that the reason crime is the way it is in Memphis and other urban areas, 2 reasons: poor education outcomes and poor economy among black people. I've already talked about what black pastors have committed to the mayor of Memphis that they would do. But what about the business community? What about the Chamber of Commerce? What can they do to help improve educational outcomes? I have met with Ted Townsend at the Chamber, suggested some of these things. He has agreed to them and agreed to host follow-up meetings. But the Chamber of Commerce can help improve educational outcomes by providing, let's say, empty, vacant commercial space to have classrooms in while the school board is closing school buildings. They're going to be closing very soon. The school board is hemorrhaging maintenance dollars. I mean hemorrhaging. So that we've got to do something now. And as a community, we got to work together. Ribbon cuttings are fine. Cocktail parties are fine. Come on, step up with some vacant commercial space that's already built out, and let's improve educational outcomes while we can. Because although the president says we're going to stay there as long as possible, it ain't going to be forever. And it's up to us to do something to change that now.
So as you mentioned that, and I agree, poverty, basically, in summary, and education are the two of the main stakeholders. Pete was my D-Min advisor. These were 8 of the points that I brought about how the corporate and government community should surround cities like Memphis to solve these kinds of problems. That's exactly what we focused in on. But how did we get there? These things were divested over years and over time. And so when you take away resources and you don't ask your business community to step up and do more than support dinners and rallies and things to that effect and golf tournaments, this is where you end up. And that may be a shot fired, but it's the truth. We do menial things rather than the macro things. We saw in places around the globe where in the Carolinas, the banking community decided to come back together and reinvest in the downtown area and move resources in those spaces. We have to hold corporations accountable. We have to hold communities accountable. It's not just on the shoulders of government alone, but then we also have to say to the government, where is your part? And where are the dollars that are supposed to be there? And then to our elected officials, I'm with Dr. Whalum. I remember his voice many years ago when he said to some of his peers, you're making a bad mistake. You're giving away resources here that we need to try and keep, not just for the young people in the community, but for the workers who are there as well. We saw a middle class erosion take place here over many years. And it's still taking place. Poverty didn't just show up one day. It's been 40 or 50 years walking slowly into our communities.
Yeah. You do have trust in our city officials, though.
I have trust that our city officials are doing what they can do with what they have. I agree that it is far more of a complex issue than just our city officials. We let our state officials get away with so much, and then sometimes our federal officials are quiet on the eve of Reconstruction. Our business community needs to step up. They need to aggressively step up.
And before you respond, Dr. Gacke, I want to also mention Police Chief C.J. Davis mentioned that violent crime was down before the National Guard was announced. So why do you support the National Guard coming to Memphis if she's saying that crime was down before they got here?
Because of the assistance that is provided by the human resources represented by these 13 federal agencies, not one, not two, 13 federal agencies at our behest, and additional federal agencies, according to the memorandum, Health and Human Services, Housing and Urban Development. All of these agencies are at our behest. Now, again, I don't know what the motivation is, but they're here, and we ought to, speaking of local officials, we ought to ask for all of those resources. Bring them in, baby, bring them in. Let's do what we can do right now.
But we should ask for those resources under the authority and with the coordination of our mayor and
Absolutely.
Our police chief.
Absolutely.
I think the way they are being brought in is somewhat of a Trojan horse. We're saying we're giving you these things, but like you said, we don't know the motivation. We don't know what's really behind it. And is there some long-term systemic plan here to do something different? We don't know. All of those rumors come forth. But there's nowhere in American history where I see this taking place, where you go into a city and you don't at least work through the city leadership in order to help things get better.
Dr. Gacke, we were outside, you were mentioning it's like a dog and pony show in so many words.
Well, it's a spectacle, for sure, especially around the National Guard. We have troops moving through the city. I don't really know that they're going to do much about violent crime. Where are they even going to be?
Yeah.
You know, violent crime is in particular areas, it's between particular people. It's not something like, you know, how's the National Guard going to stop a murder?
Right.
I just don't understand how. I mean, especially if it's 150 National Guard, that's a drop in a bucket. A city this size. Where are they going to be? How are they going to be deployed? What are they actually going to be doing? I think the task force, you know, of all these federal agencies, that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
But I don't get the National Guard. I also don't get, so the estimate cost of all of this is around $100 million. That's a huge amount of resources to do what? That is of lasting quality for the community of Memphis. Now, $100 million towards education and economic opportunities, that could make a significant difference. So, and I'm not discounting like the direct, you know, holding accountable those who are doing wrong, the criminals, right? Sure, we can agree on that, but we can't, I don't think, let that obscure the fact that this is a withdrawal of economic opportunity. It's a withdrawal of resources to focus them on a kind of militarization of a police force or of a response to crime. And in the long haul, has a lot more to do with supporting a kind of authoritarian view of government than it does to trust local government officials who actually know what's going on the ground to get something done.
Any response?
We're 8 days behind. We are 8 days late in working together to push forward solutions. There are always going to be questions. The questions that Professor Gacke is asking, the questions that Pastor Norman, they are always going to be there, and they're going to be more with each passing day. But every day that we don't put forth at least logical proposals to solve the problems is another day that we're behind the 8 ball. Listen, I said earlier, I'm a lone wolf. I'm a voice crying in the wilderness with regard to some of these ideas. But the people who are going to be watching your interview show, this right here, elected officials, people who can move forward with pulling us together, coalescing the community, every aspect of the community, to try to do things that have not been done, to Pastor Norman's point. Chamber of Commerce, they've been awfully quiet. And I'm calling them out every time I get a chance to step up and make this community better. There's not going to be much time after this.
I don't believe in plans that don't make effort to minimize unintended consequences. And I believe that this plan, with the rapid nature in which it has come together and the way it is unfolding, bringing these agencies without an interjurisdictional agreement with someone who has a cultural connection to this community being at the head of it, and then calling the shots and effectively communicating to the citizenry. I don't believe that that's a real good recipe for something great. I think there are too many ifs and Dr. Whalen is right. There are too many questions, and there will be more questions, but there will be consequences as well. And I'm not willing to just put consequences out there and say, oh, well, let it happen. Because until the consequence rests at one of our doors, or if it hits one of our homes or our spaces, that's when we get fired up. And I don't want that to be the aftermath of this. I think we had time to sit down and to work towards this. If it means burning the midnight oil 24 hours a day and taking shifts and tagging each other out and saying, here's the plan, finish it from here, we can do that. We can walk and chew gum at the same time in Memphis. I think we can do that.
Are you offended not being a part of the Memphis Safe Task Force, or not being asked, or were you asked to be a part of it?
No, it's not an offense thing. I don't think that's my role particularly. I think there are people, I'm offended that my mayor and my police chief aren't as well informed as I think they should be. And let's face it, we have seen too many photo ops. And what I am offended by, I'm offended by federal officials talking to the citizens of Memphis the way that they did last week. I'm offended by that. I'm offended that someone would get on our airwaves and use expletives and curse at us, and then also say words that really seem like dog whistles to me. I'm offended by that more than anything else. It's not about whether you get invited to a meeting or not. Our voices will be heard. And then we're the kind, I know I am, if you don't invite me, I'm gonna call and ask for a meeting anyway.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think they seem like dog whistles. They are dog whistles.
They are, okay. Well,
we know exactly what the rhetoric is, but
Right.
rhetoric works both ways. And if we overload rhetoric the way that some organizations did the other day in opposing, again, I think it's spitting into the wind. We're not going to change the man's mind. And the more we say, don't do this, the more he's going to determine to do it. But on the other hand, he can't control what we do either. And the work that I'm suggesting is much harder than a press conference. It's much harder than calling a microphone to your face to say something. It's long term. What I'm talking about is going to take the next 365 days, and most people are not willing to commit for that.
And I agree with that. I think the moment has passed for us to change the minds of the individual. Let me be clear, the individual who decided to make this decision. I don't even think his cabinet around him was consulted and wanted to really go forward with this. I believe this started with a comment by Kash Patel that was inappropriate on a morning television show on a Sunday morning, and it set this off, and it has gone just haywire since then. I do believe it is important for men like these who are seated here and other leaders in this era of time for us to be on record as to how we feel about this, and that we did not idly stand by and try to shape the moment. There's more than just what's happening. It is our involvement in saying we need to push back where we can, shape the outcomes, be at the table, ask for whether we receive it or not. We can't say that courage skipped this moment in time because we just decided to be complicit. And I'm not thinking anybody here is complicit. I believe deep within Dr. Whalen's heart, he recognizes that yes, this is going to happen. And while he did call for the guard, he's not out here saying, I'm calling for these dog whistles and I'm calling for you to talk to people the way you've been talking to them. I want to make that straight. I don't want his words to get compromised like they tried to compromise the mayor's message as well. I believe he stands with us in the civil moment of the righteousness and the justice that needs to go forward and the way it needs to go forward. But we do need to fix crime. Two things can be true at the same time.
I'm a little worried too that this crime narrative
Me too.
is being used. I mean, one of the federal agencies is ICE. And we have a large Hispanic population in the city of Memphis. And that is an agency that is running rogue in our city and in other cities, destroying a community. And under the umbrella, under this story that somehow they're fighting crime. Well, it's not about crime. It's about an agenda at the national level that is anti-immigrant, that is anti-people of brown skin, and they are being targeted under this narrative of fighting crime. And it's easy, I think, that the anti-crime narrative, who wants to be for crime? Nobody's for crime, and yet crime is being used as this wedge to open a door for all sorts of authoritarian political activity on the part of different federal agencies. That's what I'm concerned about. I'm opposed to crime. Everybody's opposed to crime. The question is, how are we actually doing that? And at this point, if the federal forces are in charge, then the local folks who actually know what needs to be done, they may be at the table, but they're not being consulted.
One of my greatest concerns is that we are now given data on a daily basis, and we've been taught not to trust the data that our own police department was giving us. But now we're giving data on a daily basis saying, this is what we've done. This is what we're doing. Okay.
Without context.
Without context and anything. So 200 arrests, right? Woo. Is that 200 people brought off the streets that have done something bad? Or was that 199 people that got a traffic ticket?
Right.
Or one person that got arrested? Or what is an arrest? Define it. That's all we've been asking for, is define what this means, share with us what's really happening. And then we have some data to use to measure this, to see what we can sustain and where we need to go forward, how we need to educate people in our community. Some people, 50 people were arrested for this. Don't do this. We can teach and train and move forward. But right now, we're just told, trust the data, here it is.
And we're pushing for that too. No comparative data. Who was arrested? Was it a warrant arrest? We don't have any of that information as well.
And who did the arrest?
And who did the arrest?
Right? Is this something the Memphis Police Department's doing and already has been doing, or is this because of this federal task force? We don't know.
Yeah.
Right.
And I do want to also get y'all's thoughts on our federal leadership also calling for using U.S. cities as a training ground for military to train in. Your thoughts about that?
It's very troubling, and it's one of those things that I am not sure the degree to which we can stop it. I'm certain that we can't stop rhetoric. However, and this is where I'm so glad that MTS and others taught me that prayer that says, Lord, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And in that wisdom, that's why I keep coming back to this micro view, to do what I can do. Who knows what's going to happen? We could be on the brink of Armageddon. We could be on the brink of a breakdown in society that nobody's ever seen before. I don't know that. And what I hear in a lot of our leaders locally and elsewhere is fear. They won't say, I'm afraid, but that's what I hear in the pronouncements. But God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. And that's where we make our impact in society, by believing that and by teaching that. I don't know the answers to the questions you're asking about the data and I don't know the answers. Yeah. I am trusting that in His will, God is going to make sure we know what we need to know. But I also know that there are things that we can do. And I'm sounding like a broken record, but when we all walk out of here today, we're going to eat somewhere. Why not go eat at a Black-owned restaurant? Why not help some struggling business? I'm saying that no matter what is coming down the pike, there are things that we can do. I truly believe that, man.
See, KT did the preacher thing on us. He got us in there, and then he shifted to the God and the faith moment. See, he left his other moment of standing firm for the God.
No, I just wanted you to talk again.
But no, he threw that in there. And you can't argue with that part, right?
Right.
We do have faith.
Right.
And we're not abandoning our faith. But I am concerned about my congregants and citizens and neighbors who are triggered by these kinds of
Absolutely.
moments. To say we're going to use American cities as training grounds for military forces, The military has a purpose, primarily, which is to kill. I mean, let's put that in the atmosphere. I don't know.
I don't think that's true.
Well, what does the military do on foreign soil?
No, the
when
purpose
you're training,
of the military is not to kill.
what is to control elements by force?
Yeah, but the purpose
So
of the military
if
is
I'm
to
taking
defend.
my military, I'm defending against my own citizens.
It's not to
I'm
kill,
defending.
though.
Oh, Pastor,
Purpose-
what do they do
Purpose, you
when
said
you
the purpose
drop
of the
off?
military is to kill. That's not true.
Look, well, when you drop the military off anywhere and anything encroaches upon their mission, what do?
Their purpose is not to
They
kill.
kill it.
Keith.
Well,
They
it's
kill
a
it.
different purpose now, right? Because we now have a Department of War.
We have a
and not
Department of
Department
War.
of Defense. And so that rhetoric, there's a reality behind that rhetoric. And I mean, any talk of using U.S. cities as a training ground for military occupation or military action is blatantly unconstitutional, authoritarian, and I will use the F word, fascist.
I agree with
So what President Trump has suggested.
I thought you were going to
is-
use the other F
Yes,
word for a minute.
we're a polite company.
Right.
But it's wrong,
Yeah.
right? It's morally wrong, it's strategically wrong, it's constitutionally wrong. We should all be able to emphatically oppose that. It's the ravings of a lunatic at this point who's unfit to be in office. If he truly believes that, he is violating his own oath to be faithful to the Constitution.
And two more questions and we'll wrap up here. I do want to get your perspective, Dr. Gacke, from a student perspective at Lemoyne-Owen. What are you hearing from students about the National Guard or federal occupation in Memphis? And I want to hear from you all about what are you hearing from your congregation about the National Guard in Memphis?
So the students are very concerned. Just the other day, there were the helicopters flying over the campus continuously. There was a lot of fear and panic on the campus about what does this mean? So much so that our campus security had to issue a notice saying there's no crime activity, that we're aware of. There's nothing going on here other than this sort of act of federal intimidation. They didn't put that in the language, but I'm adding that. A federal intimidation of an entire community of South Memphis, which is where Lemoyne-Owen College is located, right? So I think that's very disturbing to the students. It's certainly disturbing to the faculty and the staff as well. And the students have a lot of questions, like why Memphis? I'm going back to my original question. How does it feel to be a problem? They see themselves as being defined as a problem rather than being defined as the potential solution, as they are people who are being educated. They're students, right? They are being prepared to be workers. They're being prepared to be citizens. And instead, they're being defined as the problem.
And what is your response to their concerns?
My response to their concerns is to try to affirm that they are doing the right thing by being in school, by continuing to do their studies, and to be aware of what is happening, to be cautious when they leave campus, which is what they've always had to be, right? So, I mean, part of this is, I'm speaking as a white man, but Black America has always been defined as a problem by a white power structure. And so in some respects, it's nothing new. In other respects, it is new because the full force of the federal government is now being directed towards the city of Memphis.
And to clarify real fast, was it a federal helicopter?
Yes.
Which agency?
Who knows? It's
Okay.
a black helicopter flying over
They
continuously.
were also flying over Pine Hill Golf Course and other spaces,
Gotcha.
which I know Dr. Williams is going to make a comment.
Go ahead.
But to further say the act of intimidation, go back and check the logs. You had no record of those helicopters in the airspace, and nor was it coordinated. Something that we've seen with helicopters that actually caused an accident in the Dulles Air Force airspace as recently as a few months ago.
January.
That should at least be something that is precautionary in this space to communicate that we're going to have helicopters out moving around. It's all about communication. And if you're doing it the right way, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, legitimate points all. But in answer to the question about our congregants, we have a period of time on Sundays where I have all of the kids come to the altar with me. We all sit on the floor together. And interesting, last Sunday, they were excited about the fact that they saw a black helicopter pilot. a Tennessee state trooper helicopter. There was an article on Facebook or somewhere that showed a black woman as a helicopter pilot and another picture of a young black man as a helicopter pilot. And they weren't saying they were afraid of the Tennessee Highway Patrol. They were saying, I want to be a pilot one day. So I think that part of what our responsibility is as leaders is to teach our children that life is complex and complicated, and there's at least two sides to every issue. And some of y'all's mamas and daddies are in the National Guard. Some of y'all's mamas and daddies are police officers. I think it's our responsibility to lead with courage and wisdom and help them manage their emotions. But in answer to the question about our kids, that's what stood out in my mind. They're excited about helicopter pilots, man.
And to that point, I agree. I like the way he put that frame on that. But Memphis has a helicopter. They bring it out to our church and they meet the pilots on a regular basis. And all of them are black. And they bring the horses and all of that kind of stuff out too on a regular basis. My congregation is not monolithic. We come from a wide range of people, from people who live all over the Mid-South, some in North Mississippi, some as far away as other parts of Tennessee. So they bring different viewpoints, and I don't try to shape their viewpoints in terms of whether this is good or bad. I want to give them information about how to navigate it, how to rely on our faith in order to go through it, but certainly to be well informed and to make sure that we get facts and data and get this information. That's something that I have to do on a regular basis on many issues. This is not the first issue that can come about. I will say this, I am very concerned about congregations that have nothing to say. And once again, that can bring us to a space where we don't allow people to talk about things that are healthy for them or to express. I believe God is a big God. He can handle praise as well as protest all in the same space. And so let the people who want to praise. Let the people who want to raise a fist and shake their hand at God do the same thing. He's big enough to handle them both.
Are people saying they're scared?
All of it.
Excited?
It's a full gamut of emotions.
Okay.
We have those who are not sure of how to process it. Because let's face it, this is some very sensitive information. And when we talk about people who are well informed or not so well informed, people process it differently. You're talking about elderly people as well, who sometimes are not as astute as to what's really going on, and they need people to kind of interpret. I think Pastor Whalen made the best point of it all. We don't want to shape and color through our interpretations by fear or by force any response. We want to allow faith to guide us in all of those responses. But yes, we have them all over the board.
Yeah, faith. Again, while we're back here in this church part of the Civil Rights Museum in the Jim Crow era. Well, unless you all have more questions, do y'all have questions? Okay, I wanted to let you all just make one final closing argument about your stance and for the sake of time and where you all stand as far as the National Guard, as far as questions you have, concerns, and just your one final closing argument. Dr. Zaki, we'll start with you.
I think my ongoing concern, and which leads to all sorts of questions, is what's the point? What's the point of this? I don't believe that the point is crime. Crime's been a problem in the city of Memphis for a number of years. Why this attention by the federal government, this president at this point in time? And why call in a militarized force, the National Guard, to somehow address a problem that is not essentially about repression, but it's a problem that needs to be addressed through education and economic opportunity, among other things. And so I'm questioning the story or the framing of this as a crime issue. I don't think it's a crime issue. Crime has been an issue. Why now the big focus? Well, I think it goes back to this opening question of how does it feel to be a problem? Why is this being defined as the problem at this point by this particular presidential administration, particularly since the local government people were not consulted in advance? They weren't crying out for help, to the federal government. And so I'm questioning the framing, And because I'm questioning the framing, I'm also questioning the actions that are going to be taken.
Chamber of Commerce, step up during these days, improve educational outcomes. Black pastors, support local Black-owned businesses. Memphis Police Department is 500 officers short. Aggressively recruit from among the National Guard members who will be here, from among the federal representatives who will be here. That's mine.
But on record, you do support the
I
National
support
Guard.
the National Guard, absolutely. Been calling for 2 years.
And you are opposing the National Guard and their
Yes, I oppose it because
Correct.
I think it's not an effective response to crime. I also think it's part of this larger story that is not an accurate framing of what is actually going on in the city of Memphis.
and you oppose the National
I oppose the National Guard being here. However, once a thing has been done, I think our role now is to educate the population and help them to navigate what has happened. My points now, I'd like to make them very clear.
Yes, sir.
The browning of America has been on this president's agenda since his first administration. He targeted many countries and he cut off the whole immigration process in many ways, said very derogatory things. And he has now come back in his second term with understanding from those who helped him with the writing of certain agendas and project labels, which I will not even give glory to. But these were intentional efforts that were being made to take away benefits from people who need them most, to use the military to bring control in cities around the United States of America that are led by Democratic mayors and that have a brown population that is very strong. This seems to be a targeted part of this agenda, and until you can show me otherwise, until you show me by sending these same military forces to Republican-led cities with crime problems as well, because they do exist, that doesn't change my mind. However, where are we in this particular narrative now? We have to work with our mayor and our police chief, and we have to work with the powers that be to bring the best out of this that we can and have a sustainable program and sustainable plan so that we're not in this same position ever again.
Yeah.
And we can do that as a city. We have that resilience. We've proven it over and over again.
And are you from Memphis?
No.
Where are you from? You said
Grew up in
Minneapolis.
Minnesota.
That's right.
Yeah, but
Yes.
I've been here nearly 30 years.
Minneapolis?
No, here.
No, I'm saying
Memphis.
Minnesota.
No, I grew up in Rochester.
Rochester.
I'm not just from Memphis, though. I'm from South Memphis.
South Memphis.
Carver High School.
You're from Memphis, right? You said
It's
so.
orange down, 2 round, 3 down.
Well, Mike, you have any questions? Okay. Well, thank you all for joining us for this
Sure,
very
thank you.
important conversation. And the story will likely air one day next week.